A 21-year-old Colorado man is facing 10 counts of murder after opening fire at a Boulder grocery store yesterday, the second mass shooting in less than a week. President Biden reflected on the toll today in a White House address.
10 lives have been lost, and more families have been shattered by gun violence in the state of Colorado. I just can't imagine how the families are feeling, the victims whose futures were stolen from them, from their families, from their loved ones.
While the investigation is ongoing, CNN is reporting the shooter used an AR-15 style rifle to carry out the attack. Biden called on Republicans in Congress to help pass a law that would ban assault weapons like that one, along with a universal background check measure and other gun reforms.
This is not, it should not be a partisan issue. This is an American issue. It will save lives, American lives, and we have to act.
Yesterday's shooting came just days after a Georgia man shot and killed 8 people, including 6 Asian women at 3 Atlanta area spas last Tuesday, reportedly using a gun he bought only hours before. The shooter told police he wasn't motivated by race, and some investigators, including FBI Director Chris Wray, seem to agree. Others have argued the shooter's intentions were clear, including Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey, who said in a statement, "This was a murderous, horrific hate crime, and we need to treat it that way instead of making excuses for white violence and domestic terrorism." The shooting has brought renewed attention to a hate crime reform bill the Attorney General filed, along with 2 state lawmakers last month, after a series of violent attacks on Asian Americans across the country. The Attorney General joins me now. Maura Healey, thanks so much for being here.
It's great to be with you, Jim.
So 2 mass murders in a week. President, again, as I just said, calls for a ban on assault weapons. If he can't even get the Senate to pass a background check bill that, 85 to 90% of the American public support, the likelihood of an assault weapons ban passing is virtually zero, is it not?
Well, certainly that's not great looking at those numbers right now. But I'll tell you, Jim, I feel like there's a different moment right now and a different movement. I mean, for a long time, we talked about this as a public safety issue. This is a public health issue, and my heart goes out to the families and the victims in Boulder. I texted Shannon Watts, who lost her son in Colorado years ago, and in Aurora, and has gone on to become, a leader in this space. And it's just hard to imagine. Here we are again, and twice in 1 week. But Jim, we know gun laws save lives, and universal background checks save lives. The House just passed that. It's before the Senate. Let's see what we can do there. Yes, I support President Biden in his call for an assault weapons ban, but there are a number of things that we can do as a matter of common sense reforms that will save lives. The United States, has this exceptional distinction. Our gun rate deaths are 25 times the rate of any other developed country. This is a public health issue that cries out for attention.
Well, let's go from 10 murders to 8 just days before in Atlanta. What do you say to people like FBI Director Wray, who seem to be buying into this sexual addiction notion advanced by the killer? What do you say to him about the issue of what this was really all about?
Well, first of all, it was a hate crime. And I will say that to you as a prosecutor and as somebody who has spent time looking at these issues, handling these cases. There is a rise of extremism, of white supremacy, of white nationalism, and of hate across this country. We've, of course, have seen the uptick in hate directed at members of our Asian American community. And always there's been associated, of course, with some of this activity, misogyny, right? And so you see sort of in Atlanta, all of this coming together in this horrific murder. But in terms of, I'm not interested in excuses or explaining. Fundamentally, call it what it is. It's a hate crime. And it's something that we need to do something about. And that involves going after the white extremists and white supremacists. It involves going after hate. It involves addressing issues of misogyny. And clearly, it wasn't just Director Wray's comments. The initial sheriff on this scene there in Atlanta, remember, described it as that perpetrator having had a, quote, bad day. Okay, so obviously we have some more work to do around this country in terms of educating law enforcement about what incidents like this are truly about.
I want to pick up on the misogyny part of what you said. We started a discussion on the radio, you, Mardragan, and I yesterday, about state laws and the reform you proposed. You suggested I get more information from your staff, which I did. My understanding is the current state law includes women, gender in the reporting requirements around hate crimes, but does not include them in the prosecutorial statute. You filed a reform bill. Would that omission be fixed if the reform that you filed with those two legislators were to become law, Attorney General?
Absolutely. Gender will now be included, not only for reporting purposes, but also is something that is prosecutable. And it's absolutely necessary. Why that wasn't there in the first instance, I don't know. I came in as Attorney General in 2014. The last reform was back in 2012. But I have undertaken the effort to file this new legislation to meet the moment. And the fact is, we have a rise in hate crimes around this country, and we in law enforcement and my office, we need the tools. Judges, prosecutors, investigators need the tools to be able to make sure these cases are properly investigated, prosecuted, and adjudicated. So, not only will this include gender, it will also provide stronger penalties, and it will also move many of these cases from what was the district court setting, Jim, to superior court, where we prosecute more serious crimes.
Let's stay in the courtroom for a moment. You were the first Attorney General in the country to seek personal liability from the Sackler family, owners of Purdue, which obviously gave America the deadly OxyContin. One thing I've never understood, Attorney General, in your litigation, an email that is maybe the most egregious in a long line of egregious emails from 2001. This is from Richard Sackler. An internal email. We have to hammer on the abusers in every way possible. They are the culprits and the problem. They are reckless criminals. I know you are trying to assure that they don't leave this litigation as billionaires. Why don't they leave litigation as inmates? I really don't. I know you get this a lot. I don't understand why language like that is not tantamount to criminal behavior on the part of at least one Sackler, if not more.
Yeah, Jim, I'll tell you this. There's nobody who wanted criminal prosecution of the Sacklers in Purdue more than me. The entity really who had that responsibility was the U.S. Department of Justice, given the scope of the activities and the entity with the actual tools to make the case. Instead, as we saw disappointingly in the waning days of the Trump administration, Purdue and the Sacklers made a deal for relatively short money to a civil settlement. And that was unfortunate. I know that the Biden administration has an opportunity to revisit that. I hope that they do. But I'll tell you, in the meantime, we have been aggressive going after Purdue and the Sacklers. Yeah, the Sacklers ran to court and tried to claim bankruptcy protection, and we're fighting them. They filed an amended plan the other day with a bankruptcy judge. And I've said that it's not good enough. The Sacklers need to pay a lot more money. They need to pay back the billions and billions they reaped on the backs of and at the expense of so many families here in this state. I want full transparency. I want the creation of a document repository where every memo, email, is up there posted for research and public health experts and the public to see. And I want Purdue to be wound down forever, not in business again. And that's, where I continue to be. This will play out over the next few months through the bankruptcy proceeding. But, Jim, I sat with my families again the other day. I have a group of families we regularly meet with who've lost loved ones, mostly children, to this crisis. And by the way, Jim, opioid overdoses and deaths have gone up from last year. And that's what these families want. That's the kind of justice and accountability that these families want, in addition to having seen the Sacklers go to jail. And I share with them in that desire.
Well, I want to follow up just not briefly. Based on what you know, I understand you say this is on the Department of Justice and Merrick Garland, its new leader, new Attorney General. Based on what you know, and you probably have access to as much internal information on the Sacklers as any Attorney General in the country, do you believe they have committed federal crimes?
I believe that one could make the case for federal crimes.
You do?
I do.
I do. staying in
But it takes,
Massachusetts.
it takes the courage of a prosecutor to be able to do that, And for a long time, Purdue and the Sacklers, they've owned Congress, they've owned the Department of Justice, they're represented by lawyers that previously served, in administration. So, it just hasn't been this way. But I think through our lawsuit, joined, by other state AGs, we've been the first to get this far in achieving the kind of revelation of what actually happened. But Jim, it's never going to be enough, because how do you put a price on what happened to somebody and their really immeasurable loss?
I'm not one of those families, but one price, an orange jumpsuit to me would go a long way. Attorney General, you made history when you were elected, we all know, as the first LGBT or Q Attorney General, at least openly so. Kim Janey made history last night when Marty Walsh resigned, sworn in as Secretary of Labor. She'll be sworn in tomorrow. First black woman to be the mayor of the city of Boston after a mere 54 white men in a row. What's your reaction to Janey?
I'm just so happy. I mean, you see the smile on my face. It's a long time coming. But I'm so happy for Mayor Janey. I'm so happy for the city. The city is majority minority, as it's termed by some, and I think there are real opportunities, as we move forward. But obviously, a barrier that existed for way too long. But it's a really happy day to see her take on this role.
There's one other barrier I'm not sure if you're familiar with. You probably, maybe, I don't know. You know that there's never been a woman elected governor of Massachusetts. Were you aware of that?
Somebody told me that.
Yeah, you were. So 14 months from now, you got to decide what office you're running from. I know you don't answer these questions, but I feel obliged. When do you make a decision about what position you want to hold after the next election? When do we expect to hear from you?
Well, it's something that I've got to think about and consider. I will tell you, though, Jim, I'm really focused on the work of the office. There's an incredible amount of work to do, particularly around the hardship coming out of and through this COVID pandemic for businesses, for families, for our economy. My office has a top priority of equity across everything that we do, and I'm excited about what we can do in that space. But, who knows? And I do feel incredibly privileged to be in this role and to have an opportunity to serve the people of the state. And there's a ton more work to do. But, to the Kim Janeys of the world out there, I think it is important because, seeing is believing. And every time we do elect a woman or a woman of color, it gives hope and inspiration to some little girl out there that they can be anything they want to be. And, that to me is the kind of world we want to work to make possible.
Thank you so much, Maura Healey, Attorney General. It's a pleasure to talk to you as always.
Well, happy spring, Jim. Be well.